It's now time for this month's broadcast of Learning Now TV.
Well, welcome to the July edition of Learning Now Television. Amazing. We're right in the middle of the summer and I hope everyone's enjoying themselves. Kate, what's on the show today?
Well, just as the start of the summer holidays begin here in the UK, we are jam-packed, so no rest for the wicked. Laura Overton joins us to talk about the CIPD's latest research. James Sharrod, really interesting interview that you did, Nigel. An award winner in education, bit of a different slant for us, but really, really interesting, coming at early years education. So very interesting, especially for the parents out there. Stella Collins joins us to continue her series. We're now up to the third part, where her and her colleague Karen Mose are discussing gaining attention and cognitive overload, something I'm sure we can all relate to these days. And Martin Cousins is back discussing a really, really important academic article from MIT Sloan on reimagining HR. It feels like that's what I've been talking about for quite a long time in with the practitioner audience. So to see this coming out of an academic institution feels very important. So hope you enjoy the show.
It's a pleasure to speak with Laura Overton again. And we're talking about a very interesting report, which she really is the brains behind. She's done all the analysis and the writing of the report. It's for CIPD, and it's called Learning at Work 2023. And first question, Laura, there are lots of reports about what's going on in the workplace in 2023 and the state of learning. There are all sorts of white papers. Every supplier seems to have got out some analysis of learning at work. What makes this special? What makes this different? And why are you so enthusiastic about it?
Oh, well, you know me, Nigel. I just love to get my hands on data about our industry that might kind of uncover something that will help us take the next step. So, but this one for me was super special. Andy Lancaster from the CIPD and the team there asked me to get involved because, you know, it's a real priority for the CIPD, you know, thinking about, you know, improving work and working lives and how essential the role of learning and development is. But I think for me, what was really interesting in this is that they actually engage with YouGov to gather the data. So for me, the breadth of insight that came from those 1,100 participants, you know, out of our normal field. You know, Nigel, it was about people who, yes, ran learning and development, yes, worked in L&D teams, but also those HR professionals who have got a learning remit, and also business people who are passionate about learning in their teams and consider themselves as a learning practitioner, even though they hadn't got anything to do with L&D in their title. So getting that breadth of insight from large, small organisations, predominantly in the UK, was really important to me, and that kind of independent view of what's going on with learning in the workplace, not just in our L&D tribe, you know, that hang out together, if that makes sense.
Yes, and I guess if YouGov are doing it, they're not in any way trying to find something. They're just trying to find out what the data is saying. And that must be very attractive. But, you know, if you look at it, it talks about private sector priorities: achieve growth targets, increase productivity, reduce costs. Where does learning fit into that? In theory, in my view, it should be driven through it, but you could also achieve growth targets and increase productivity by dropping all the learning and reducing the cost of of paying for all this stuff. So how do those two things interface? Because that's the kind of essence of the report.
Absolutely. And you've got to bear in mind that it was the learning professionals themselves are saying this is what we believe and see as being the top priorities in our organisation. So it's the priorities that the learning professionals are tuned into at the moment, the things that they're aware of that are critical for the business. And so we asked those three areas. What are the organizational priorities? What are the people priorities? And that surfaced things like, so kind of retention and succession planning and all of those kinds of things. And then we also asked, what are your priorities in the context of this bigger picture? And I think what's super exciting is the fact that, the skills agenda is at the number one priority that was flagged by the learning and development. And that kind of brings all three together. But I think there are a lot of other initiatives that were going on within learning and development where perhaps there might be a little bit more potential for opportunity to contribute. I think they're focusing on the skills agenda because that's what everyone's talking about. People professionals, business professionals, and is essential for growth and competitiveness right now.
But they're not doing it in isolation. And that's what fascinated me. Because I'm sick to death with it's all about skills. We're driving the skills we're doing, but no one's talking about the climate in which it takes place. And this one, creating a climate of trust, encouraging inquiry and curiosity, getting an organization that embraces mistakes and creates opportunities to learn from them, adapting processes and behaviors based on organizational learning. There you've got if you like, you've got a seed bed for the skills to grow. That, to me, in my naive way, that is important. I thought that was very hopeful. I know it's not all organizations, but it's a good chunk of them are taking that seriously. Is that what you found?
I think that for me it was really important because obviously, this is my 20th year of researching learning and development. So it's a big year for me right now. But, I wanted to start the report looking at the context in which individual learning professionals are involved in their practice. And so for me, capturing exactly what you just said there, Nigel, was really important. Right at the front, we looked at organizational priorities, people priorities, and the environment in which learning professionals are currently working. So we did look at those issues of curiosity. And it showed that, that we're working in tough environments. We're not working environments, I think it's only about 40% believe that their organisation encourages curiosity, things like that. So, our environments are tough to work in. And I felt it was really important for us to acknowledge that as learning. We're not there to create a learning environment. We're there to leverage the opportunity for learning in the environment that works with.
And take account of overall team workload seems to be increasing, while headcount seems to be staying the same or decreasing. So that you've got a more difficult climate in which to make this work. And therefore, just chucking in programs and courses is just not going to work. And I think this report, that's what I liked about it. It seems to get at the reality of working life and the reality of the challenges, and into which the criticalness of increasing competence and learning is played out, rather than seeing that as totally separate from day-to-day work. It's not. It's right into it. And you've acknowledged that. And I think that's very, very important.
Yeah, it was important to me because of seeing the evidence. And, people are they tend to talk in our industry, is it about our design? Is it about our programs? Is it learning in the flow of work? It's always one thing or another. One is better than another. But actually, the complexity in which we are delivering our practice is really important to acknowledge that. We have to adapt. We have to work with it if we're going to be making a significant difference in equipping and getting organizations ready for change. For me, that's the role of learning and development. If there's a bias that I have in coming to this data, it's a belief that we're not there to deliver courses, but we're there to harness our professional practice to allow organization to be equipped and ready for change, whether it's in a current job, current role, or whether it's for the future, their future job, their future role that they're going to be needing.
Yes, and it talks about the lack of priority in organizations for learning. But I think the third one is the most important, the lack of insight about what is needed and what is working. So if I'm at the sharp end in an organization and I have no insight about my own skills deficits. No amount of exhortation from a learning operation or from even worse, from a piece of software is going to make me change, because I don't see there's a problem. And I think that is the whole point. It's a systems-wide approach that you're kind of arguing for. And where there isn't a systems-wide approach, you seem to be pointing out there are some serious problems here. And about 50% of organizations don't get it, but at least 50% seem to get it. That this is better. We're moving in the right direction.
Absolutely. I think a significant focus of the CIPD, and I think it's the correct focus, is about the fact that we should be there in our research, in our practice, as individuals, as an institute, to encourage progress, to build progress, to celebrate progress. Yes, we have to be real in that there is still a step to go, but there are significant shifts and changes. It was encouraging, Nigel, to see. I was expecting, with all the doom and gloom that's out there in the industry, to see that headcounts were going to be slashed, budgets were going to be slashed right across the board. But when I looked at the data comparing those that were increasing their budget versus those that are decreasing, there was a net increase in budget. There was a net increase in headcount. There is investment generally across the sample back into learning and development, but there is such a great expectation on us now. I think that was the thing that was really jumped out at me. It's just, well, it didn't jump. It's not a surprise, but the workload across the board is increasing. So a big thing for me was, how do we work smarter? How do we work smarter at addressing those issues in the context that we have? And I think that's really what kind of drove me hunting for answers in the data, was to say, actually, could we do things a little bit smarter in order to make a really...
Well, one of your recommendations is work smart. Yeah, work smarter, not harder. And that goes for, I would imagine you're saying that's for L&D professionals to work smarter, not harder, and for organizations to work smarter, not harder. The next one, shift the focus from input to outcomes. Really important. So focus on what you want to achieve, not on, we did 100 hours of this or 27 hours of that, or everyone did the course and no one dropped out, or all that kind of nonsense, and operate beyond the course. Create really widespread learning opportunities. And I love your last conclusion, which is L&D leaders rise up, rise to this incredible opportunity. It's a challenge, but it's probably the best opportunity of anyone's career. And by just doing the same old, you're going to completely and utterly blow it. So I think it's a very hopeful and helpful report, don't you? It's not doom and gloom at all. But it's saying there's work to be done.
There is work to be done, but there's what we aim to get is balance throughout the report. So it's really encouraging to see, at least 3 in 5 of us now are analysing the performance issue before we're coming up with a solution. That's brilliant. But when we look at the other end of the process, particularly for formal learning, we're not as on the ball when it comes down to supporting application of learning or working with managers or encouraging that transfer back. So these things need to be in balance. You can't just start at the beginning of the process and expect impact to follow. It kind of, and that's how we try to unpack it with the data, to say, okay, well, what needs to be done? And where might we be missing out on an opportunity to drive improved value and improved credibility? And I think one of the things I love doing, I'm always on the hunt for a bit of impact, Nigel. And there was one particular question where it said, do your leaders recognise the difference you're making back on business priorities? And the proportion that said, yes, we believe that they do, it's a simple little question, started to cut the data throughout. And that really started to flag and confirm some of the things that we've been hearing about on the platform. It's confirming the fact that we should be encouraging experimentation within ourselves, confirming the fact that, having evidence-informed principles in designs is really important, confirming, the stuff we know, Nigel, the stuff that your TV channel is just so good at sharing how to do it. It's just these little indicators throughout the report that says, do it, just do it. Just do it. Just try. Please, just try it. Because it's another source of evidence that says, you're not taking a risk. You're stepping out into your future.
100%. Laura, that's an unbelievably perfect point to end. Laura Overton, thank you so much. There's a link on the screen. Please download this report. It's completely free. and it is extremely valuable. This is your agenda, sitting there right in front of you. Take up that opportunity and rise up, as the report says. Laura, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Upskill and inform your learners with Mind Tools for Business. Empower your people to thrive at work and help them step up and meet everyday workplace challenges with confidence. Our toolkit provides unlimited access to thousands of quality assured resources, all in one place. It's easy to use and on demand, anytime, anywhere. Experience stress-free onboarding with dedicated client partner support. And get access to our library of industry insight and expert analysis. Perform, manage, lead with Mind Tools for Business. Visit mindtoolsbusiness.com to find out more.
So next up, an interview very close to my heart. Michelle Parry-Slater carries on our wonderful series with the Charity Learning Consortium. And this month, she is talking to Nick Bowen, who is head of L&D for the Welsh Air Ambulance. So one of my friends is a paramedic on board the air ambulance. They land not far from my house every day and do incredible work under amazingly difficult circumstances. You know, I get to hear some tremendous stories of courage and bravery, but also skill and dexterity. And Nick tells Michelle how he really rocked the boat when he brought in their new learning program. So check it out.
In this interview, sponsored by the Charity Learning Consortium, we are speaking to Nick Bowen. Nick is from Wales Air Ambulance and has a really interesting story around induction. Now, before you all switch off and go, induction, how boring, we've done all of that. Actually, have you done your new induction with 100% of your staff? Let's hear from Nick about how he managed to persuade all of his team to go through the induction process, even if they've been in the organisation for a number of years. Nick, who are you? Where'd you come from? A little intro from you would be great, please.
No problem. Hi, Michelle. Thank you so much for having me. As you said, my name's Nick Bowen. I work for Wales Air Ambulance and I'm the Training, Learning and Development and HR Business Partner. So I do a bit of HR work, but the main part of my job is obviously the training, learning and development of the charity and everyone in it.
So I hear that you have done some good work around induction, and this all started with good stakeholder engagement. So do tell us your story.
So I haven't been in the charity that long time really. So I started in January 22, and I feel like this has kind of had a few phases. So I think I was quite lucky being new to the organisation, that I learned from my experience from an induction myself. So it was kind of going through this experience myself, thinking, okay, well, what could I do better? What more to the point, what will people actually want from their induction? So I was able to learn from my experiences, and I guess the first thing as people do in any organisation is get out there and talk to people. If you can live in an experience, which I did, I was lucky, then that helped me immensely. But first thing I did was just get out and speak to as many different people. What were their experiences? What was their kind of feedback from it? And ultimately as well, with an eye on the future, what did they want to see from an induction going forwards? Because we know what it is now, but is that actually what they wanted? So that was the first part for me, really, was just getting out and speaking to everybody. This wasn't a straightforward induction in that it was done in a couple of phases, but really getting to the crux of it, Michelle, what led us to re-induct everybody was there was a catalyst for this, which was we had a bit of a requirement to update all our kind of health and safety processes. And at the time, I think like most people, when you see quite a big issue happening in your area, you think, oh no, what am I going to do? But it was when you kind of sat back, reflect, you think, actually, this is the perfect opportunity. This is the catalyst to start again. So that's ultimately kind of what we did then is I'd learned from my experiences. I'd tried to improve our LMS and our platform as we were going along for new recruits. But it wasn't until this particular issue came up within health and safety where we thought, actually, let's start afresh. So I have to be honest with everybody and say my name probably wasn't flavour of the month, because having to re-induct everybody probably didn't go down too well with everybody, because that did mean it didn't matter whether you just joined, like myself, or you'd been at the organisation for over 20 years. Everyone was in this together, so we all had to do it again.
So let me recap on what I'm hearing you talk about, that you had a poor induction yourself, and that's not uncommon. Our own experiences when we move into organisations can help us really expose what some of the challenges are. But that was further driven by there being, a burning platform of health and safety issues. So I'm sorry that you weren't flavour of the month, but actually it sounds like it was required and needed a shift. I wonder how often learning and development professionals really do look at their induction, especially if they've been in their companies for quite some time. There's definite value in revisiting programs that are set in stone. So this is what you had to do. You had to look at it. How did you go about it? Because that is a big ask. How many people are in your organisation that you were expecting to go through this program?
So I guess we're relatively fortunate, and I've come from previous organisations that are very large, but we're relatively small in that we've got about 100 members of staff in our organisation. So I appreciate for larger organisations it may be slightly harder to do this, but for me the fundamentals were the same, and that is you've kind of got to start off with what is your starting point, where am I now, and have an idea of what is my end game, where do I ultimately want to get to. So I think, like we've mentioned already, Michelle, I think the first part for me was thinking about and talking to my members of staff and saying, right, well, what was your experiences? What do you actually think of this platform? And I think that's really important, because in my instance, even though I kind of had a fairly good idea, don't assume anything. And that's the first bit of advice I would give everything. Be prepared to be, as people say, that what you feel is that stupid person in the room. Ask that silly question and really kind of put yourself out there. Don't assume anything. As an example, for ours, our LMS in particular at the time was laid out in such a way where it wasn't straightforward. You would do a particular module, and all of a sudden you were thinking, how on earth have I got to sleep deprivation and how to parallel park when that's not actually part of my job? So that's just a really basic example of, right, well, it was clear how I could improve that. So that was a really nice one. But I think making it a second bit of advice I would give to everybody as well is try and get some guinea pigs, let's call it, or try and get some people to actually test it and test your product if you can, as much as possible. Even if it's parts of it, you may not have the finished part of it, but getting that feedback as you go along, I think is essential, because you may think it's good, but ultimately it's not for me. It's for you, and it's for all your staff. So it's got to be kind of relatable. It's got to be user friendly, and that's kind of been my focus at the whole point of this is, can it be as simple as possible for everybody to follow, so that we don't go rabbit holes and I'm not doing sleep deprivation course all of a sudden, which I wasn't meant to do. So that would probably be the second part of that. But I think going back to an earlier thing we said, Michelle, is I think you've just kind of got to be honest as well, and realize this is where we are, and kind of really in terms of selling it to senior management at the time was, this is kind of where we are, this is the feedback we're getting, but this is what it could be. And then I think that's the next part of the story then, really, isn't it, is selling the goal, selling the dream. This is what the end product could look like. And if you've done your feedback, got it, collated it all from your members of staff along the way, you can say, this is actually going down really well. Initial feedback is telling me X, Y, and Z. So I think it's really powerful to have that.
Great. Nick, what you've described to us today, and I really appreciate you doing so, is consultative L&D in practice. Speak to your stakeholders, find out what they need, be really clear on the ask, and you had your burning platform for that clarity. Test and learn as you go, and don't be fixed on an end goal, but actually to iterate as required. What a fantastic story to share with everyone today. Thank you, Nick, for coming on Learning Now TV.
Thanks, Michelle.
I'm really delighted to be talking to James Sharrod today. James is the Pathways Manager at Bright Horizons. And I'm talking to James because Bright Horizons is the winner of the learning category in the Cultural Pioneers Award, organised by HR Zone. James, tell me, why were Bright Horizons given the Learning Award?
Well, firstly, we were really delighted to win, and I think it's always nice to get that external recognition of all of the hard work that you're doing, especially for something that we're so passionate about, which is learning, and being able to give all of our employees a really good sense of being able to develop. So I think we've done lots of great things, with our apprentices and our wider professional development that we offer. But also, we actually entered a year before in 2021. And we're able to get some really great feedback from that and put that into place and then come back a year later. And I think as an organisation that always wants to be able to help our learners to develop, actually we were able to do that ourselves through winning this award, which I think was really nice.
Exactly. So you yourself as an organisation learnt efficiently and effectively and won it this time. That's excellent news. Now, you mentioned apprenticeships. How many? Often organisations have apprenticeships, but it's like a handful and claim great things. What is the proportion of apprentices you have in the workforce?
So we've got over 500 apprentices at Bright Horizons, which means that, we're a really proud member of something called the 5% Club, which is where more than 5% of your employees are doing an apprenticeship. We're actually around the 7.5% figure of everyone doing an apprenticeship at Bright Horizons, but it's absolutely a part of what we do here, and it's a way for us to be able to help people to upskill and to develop professionally whilst gaining a qualification. So something that we're really passionate about.
So, James, then tell me about Bright Horizons. What does Bright Horizons actually do for those who are not familiar with the brand?
So Bright Horizons, predominantly, we look after young children from babies up to before people go to school. That's predominantly what we do, but we're also a family solutions business. So we offer lots of other solutions across the world. So company started in the US and moved over to the UK. And we've got over 300 nurseries in the UK. But like I say, another big part is our family solutions. So we offer lots of different solutions to our families that we look after, including working with a number of organisations to offer services such as backup care. So if somebody can't attend work for that day, then we've got lots of nursery provision and other ways that we're able to help people. But generally, it's our nursery care that's the biggest side of our business.
And it's huge. 300 nurseries is substantial. So you are catering for thousands of children every single day. And you're doing well. You're growing strongly, I believe.
Yeah, it's something that we want to be able to help as many people as possible. We've got over 7,000 staff and we support over 20,000 families across the UK alone. So it's something that we're really passionate about and something that, we want to be able to bring our products and what we're able to do and to be able to help as many people as possible.
And what makes you special? What makes Bright Horizons different from other providers, apart from the emphasis on learning, on apprenticeships? But what else is it that makes the organisation stand out?
I think we're able to provide for our teams and for our staff that join us a pathway for everybody. So for anybody to come in and work for us, there's besides the fact that it's a vocational career and we're able to be able to offer that and meet those needs, we're also able to give everybody the opportunity to develop in their career. So I think sometimes care can be seen as something where you're just going to come along and look after children for your life, but no, we're able to give people the opportunity to develop in the way that they want to. So we've got leadership programs which enable anybody in the organisation to move from being an unqualified member of staff right through to being a director. We've got a program that's for everybody, and that starts with our apprenticeships, but then we've got lots of internal programs too, which enables us to be able to give those career pathways to everybody, which again, it's something that I think is vital for anybody, and something that we're really keen to be able to offer to all of our staff.
I noticed that the citation for the award said your holistic talent strategy, and you've demonstrated a bit of that. But what I noticed as well was the leadership program that you offer. You're prepared to take people at the very beginning of their career and take them through leadership steps. and if they want to help them progress to manager through to perhaps director of the organization. And you do that based on people's ability and their willingness. You don't have categories of you came in as a graduate, you came in as this. You don't pigeonhole people. You try and encourage as much development as people want to do. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah, we view every single colleague as talent, and we want to be able to enable everybody to be able to develop. I mean, we have career starters from people leaving school at 16 years old, but we've got then career changers throughout our career, throughout our apprenticeships we offer and our programs that we offer. You know, we've got somebody who's 65 doing an apprenticeship with us. It's really something that we are really passionate about, being able to help everybody individually, and that individual approach to support development is really important to us.
What about you? You know, how long have you been in the organisation? How much support and development have you had as the Pathways Manager?
I've recently, just last month, celebrated my 15-year anniversary at Bright Horizons. It's the only job I've ever had since leaving university, and I've been really fortunate to be able to spend my career with Bright Horizons. It's been a great place to grow and to learn, and I really think I'm here because of everything that I've been talking about. You know, I've done an apprenticeship in the last few years. I've always been invested in to be able to learn new things and new qualifications. And it's helped me in my career. There's never been a point where I've needed to think about anything else because I've always had that investment. So from starting on day one, working in our nurseries as a member of bank staff 15 years ago to where I am now, that's all been possible because of that investment in me as an individual.
Yes, and it's a very values-driven organisation. I noticed it says delivering with heart, and heart is actually an acronym, and the acronym stands for honesty, excellence, accountability, respect, and teamwork and inclusion. So how does the organisation live those values? Because often organisations say, we do everything with X or Y or Z, but the reality is slightly wide of that mark. Do you think the organisation lives its values? And if so, how does it do that?
Yeah, I think we live and breathe them. I think, like you say, it's very easy to be able to say these are our values, but they really are in everything that we do. We talk about them all of the time. They're right from the moment somebody is inducted into Bright Horizons, but it really is about a way of life and a way of working. And, you know, again, I think I'm a bit of a testament to that because, you know, I've been with Bright Horizons for my whole career, and it's that those heart principles that we have and those values that we hold, which are what keep people working for us and wants people to keep working here. So even development, and talking about professional development today, you know, that's inspiring excellence. It's, you know, being able to be respectful, to be able to offer it individually to everybody is the things that are really important to us.
I also noticed that well-being is important to you. You've got a mental health representative in every single one of your nurseries, all of whom have been trained by the organisation to know how to offer support and know when to red flag things as well when they realise it's beyond their capability. Tell me a little bit about that, because I think that is fascinating. And one day, perhaps every organisation will be like that. But at the moment, you stand out.
Yeah, I mean, well-being is integral to what we want to be, who we want to be, and everything that we want to offer. It's really important for us that our staff are protected and our staff are looked after. So we have a wellbeing ambassador in every single one of our settings. All of our ambassadors have gone through our own internal training that we've developed ourselves, and we've been really fortunate that training as well, we've been able to have CPD accredited. So we've got an external rubber stamp on that training. So we know that it's good quality that we're able to offer to our staff. But it's really the why that sits behind that, and the why is because we want to be able to offer that support to our staff. It's not something that's tokenistic. It's something that is really important to us. So we wanted to take that a step further and make sure that we've got that support at a local level for every colleague.
Yes, I think the why, you mentioned the why. It's very clear from our interview, the why of why Bright Horizons won that award. You're clearly not just committed to learning, but in depth across the organisation, and part of the way that you breathe and the way that you fundamentally operate. So congratulations for that. And James, I really hope the next 15 years are equally as exciting at Bright Horizons as the first 15 years. Maybe I'll come back in 15 years and say, did you stick it out for 30 years?
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, thanks, Nigel. Yeah, it's been an honour for me to work at Bright Horizons. You know, I've been delighted to be able to go on my own journey, and now I'm in a position where I can help people that were like me. So it's great to be able to, you know, bring that full circle. You know, I've got my children at Bright Horizons. I'm able to now help staff at Bright Horizons. So it really is, when we talk about family solutions, I think I'm the embodiment of that, to be able to show that development and now what I can give back as well.
Yes, yeah, and you're not a unique member of staff. I'm sure you represent the general trend and tenor of the organisation. It sounds absolutely fantastic, and clearly Bright Horizons are well-deserved winners. So congratulations again, the very best for the future, and thank you for spending a few minutes talking to me today.
Thank you.
Stella is back. Stella Collins is giving us the third part of her Brain and Learning series, which she's doing with Karen Moores. And today they're discussing attention and cognitive overload. And everybody knows a lot about attention and its deficit and cognitive overload. So a very important and interesting presentation today.
Welcome back to the short series about neuroscience in learning. I'm Stella Collins, and I want you to meet Karen Mouse, our learning architect at Stella Labs.
Hi.
Hi, Karen. Now, I'm sure you know that content isn't king, but we do need information and experiences to tell us what we don't know yet, to kickstart that unconscious incompetence into conscious incompetence. So we feel that the gap between what we don't know and what we do know and what we can't do and what we can do motivates us. But there is a huge challenge at the moment. There is too much content and it's giving us cognitive overload. We've already talked about our brains not being sponges. Brains are more like overflowing cups. When you get to a certain limit, everything just flows over the top. Apparently, we encounter 20 billion bits of information every second, so we need to filter that out. And our attention, that filtering system, is the gateway to memory. Working memory is the part of our prefrontal cortex. It has a limited capacity, and really, it can only really deal with one thing at a time. When we multitask or we switch, it lowers our performance. I want to give you an experience of cognitive overload. So I'm going to give you some very short, simple instructions. And then after I've given them, I'd like you just to pause your video and have a go at the activity. And then when you've finished, you can come back. Ready? Okay. So what I'm going to ask you to do is, without paper and just in your head, a simple task: put the months of the year in alphabetical order. Pause your video now. Have a go. Welcome back. How did you do? It was hard, wasn't it? It's really hard. I bet you can do the ordinary months of the year in their ordinary order really, really easily. But as soon as we start to take something out of context, as soon as we start to do things in a different way, it really overloads our brains. And that is a really good example of cognitive overload. In a typical training, you're probably subjecting some of your learners to cognitive overload because they're having new information, new experiences, they're often under stress, and that starts to really strain their brains. So, Karen, I know you've got some really good tips about how to avoid cognitive overload and improve performance too.
Yeah, like you said, Stella, it is always a risk. Training, learning, it is all about managing cognitive load and make sure it doesn't overflow. You don't fry people's brains. So what I have for you is 4 C's to make it easy for you to remember, so I don't overload your brain right now either. So what you need to think about your training when you're designing training is you need to have context, you need to make connections, you need to make it concrete, and why not chunk it while you're at it as well? Is there any of these 4 C's you want to hear about first, Stella?
Oh, chunking.
Chunking, yes. So make it smaller. How many things can you hold in your brain at the same time? It's not that much, but if you turn them into chunks and put stuff together, it all makes sense more. It becomes stickier for your brain because your brain loves patterns. It loves sequences. And it also helps build in a little bit more time for your brains to reflect, to process things. One of the other C's, context. Make sure that everything makes sense. Like, ask yourself, put yourself in the learner's shoes and ask yourself, what is in it for me? Like, why does this matter to me? Do I have good learning objectives? Because if things make sense, it's easier to consume it, to process it. And you won't get that much overload anymore. Which is also connected to connection, pun intended. You do not learn in a vacuum. You can always attach existing knowledge to new knowledge, which makes it much easier for your brain. And if you use real situations instead of imaginary ones, again, cognitive load goes down. And one really, really easy trick, ask a lot of questions. Questions work much better than telling people things because the guessing connects it to what they already know. And the last C, do you remember, Stella, which one it was?
Concrete.
Concrete. So if you're being vague, nobody's going to remember it. Avoid language that is too jargony, too fluffy. You know, make it human, make it simple, make it concrete, and appeal to the senses. Why not talk about smells, about tastes? Because what will be going on in the brain of your learners is that they are thinking about that smell, thinking about that taste, and a lot more neurons are lighting up. So, sounds like a win. And our biggest tip that we always use no matter what, make sure it's active. Whether it's physical activity or making learners do the work, do the thinking, if you make it active, it will be stickier.
Thank you, Karen. And I'm really curious because what I've been listening to as I've been recording these videos is the connections between each one of them. So the connections are hugely important. Thank you so much. See you next time.
Bye.
Maybe we'll do that later. Hey, so you can see this is just like using a whiteboard in a classroom. And then you do my 3-year-old's favourite, you just have a nice little wiggle. 1, 2, 3, rate it now.
A really quick question, you might want to answer this later.
You see, I love this.
And Rob Clark is back. Rob was away for a little bit, but he's back now, firing on all cylinders with another edition of Learning News. What's hot, what's not? Listen to Rob.
Delighted to have you back, Rob.
Capability academies, led by business functions, with learning on business critical capabilities, are set to become the norm for organisational learning, according to research from Cornerstone. How long do people stay in their jobs in L&D? Is employment tenure shortening or lengthening? We take a look at the External Learning Solution of the Year Gold Award winner, Lidl's project with Learning Pool to transform training for supermarket workers. Cornerstone produces an annual report about workplace learning trends. It's called People Research Lab, and the 2023 report came out recently. It found that we're going to be hearing a lot more about capability academies. Mike Bollinger from Cornerstone is here. Mike, welcome to Learning News. The report finds that capability academies will be the future of the learning and development function. What's a capability academy and how does it differ from a traditional L&D function?
So it's partly driven by this notion of moving from self-directed learning into specialized kind of learning, or tailored learning, if you will. A capability academy is defined as programs and content and experience and assignments and credentials, all based on a functional area. And we actually in the trends see it becoming more and more the future of the L&D function. It's often led by business leaders and subject matter experts, and it supports the idea that you organize around business-specific critical capabilities. I think it was Burson that came up with this phrase around space, right? It includes things like sharing, knowledge sharing, real-world practice on real-world skill sets within that domain, aligning to outcomes which are strategic and proprietary and high value, differentiating for the organization. Obviously, the collaboration should occur under the notion of a mentor or a coach. And then finally, you're trying to cultivate this expertise that can then be broadened and expanded, particularly in those differentiated areas, the space being sharing, practice, alignment, collaboration, and expertise. The capability academies themselves, owned by business, led by business, in my mind, is an opportunity for L&D because it frees us up then to be our own domain experts around learning itself rather than trying to drive all the content. So this notion from self-directed to tailored is a big part of that.
The Blue Eskimo Work and Salary Survey gives L&D employers, employees and investors insights into the workplace learning jobs market. Its author is Nick Bates, and he's here with the latest on employment tenure, how long people in L&D stay in their jobs, and with insights into employee relations in 2023.
2/3 of people surveyed have been in their jobs for 3 years or more. There's still significant job movement, with about 15% of people moving jobs within a year, but this is down slightly from 17% last year. So over the last decade, if we look back, we've seen employment tenures shortening in general, with less people staying, for example, for 10 years or more.
You've got data on how people feel they are treated by their employers.
Well, this year there's been an improvement, Robin, in employer-employee relations, with 36% of people saying that they're a lot or somewhat better treated by their employer over the last year, compared with 29% the previous year, 2021. A shortage of available talent, you'd expect companies, employers to be looking to keep hold of their employees with treatment to improve.
Lidl's project to train its shop managers won a gold at the Learning Awards earlier this year. The project was designed and delivered by Learning Pool. The task was to completely change training at the supermarket. Jack Quantrill from Learning Pool led the project, and he joins me now. What were the most significant challenges here that you had to deal with in the project, Jack?
We knew we were going to develop tablet first, so we used that as a really interesting creative challenge to come up with interactions and screen layouts that felt really kind of cool on a tablet. Tactile interactions like prodding a packet of chicken with a thermometer. We've got such a talented bunch of storyline developers at Learning Pool. In this instance, led by Ronnie Wilson-Miller, he managed to hit upon a style that used illustration and photographic backgrounds at a relatively low resolution to create something that was super light to actually kind of download. Proving the impact was probably the bigger challenge, and one that we were mindful of right from the start. I think we were very thankful that we had a partner on the Lidl side that was going to help us look at what happens beyond the delivery of this project. What we were also able to do was demonstrate that we were saving an awful lot of money, around £2.5 million, which is an absurd amount of money for a training initiative, but demonstrates what the value of the kind of the smart deployment of this type of technology can be. And what we saw was basically when people were going through the old system, we were seeing a pass rate of around 59% first time. That rose to 80% with the new initiative. Then on top of that, we tested a couple of months later, and we were seeing that 36% better in terms of learner retention after a couple of months. So I think those factors were huge. But I will also say that the piece looks great as well. Faye, Ronnie, Lena, the rest of the team have done an amazing job just making this stuff look amazing, which is what leads to those results. So a lot of factors in there, but I think all those ingredients led to the win.
And that's Learning News this July. 2 very different research reports today. Each are on the Learning News website with my full interviews with each of the guests. And you can find the links in today's programme notes. Thank you very much for your company. See you next time.
Martin is back, and he's back with a hot new report from the MIT Sloan Management Review. It's actually an article rather than a pop publication. It's from the spring 23 issue of the MIT Sloan Management Review, and it's called Reimagining HR for Better Wellbeing and Performance. Something kind of close to my heart. I think it's a great topic. And it's written by Gabriella Rosen-Kellerman, who must be Barbara Kellerman's daughter, I would hope. Be logical if it is. She's the one who wrote a lot about the failures of HR. And Martin Seligman, who is the professor at the University of Pennsylvania, who created the movement of positive psychology. So 2 interesting authors. Is it an interesting report, Martin?
It is a really interesting report, and it's quite different to what we normally review because it's actually more of a kind of think piece, and it kind of gives a historical perspective of where employee benefits and learning and development came from. And it really argues very powerfully that well-being and learning and performance are inextricably sort of linked and intertwined, and actually you really need to think about how those two, what are HR silos effectively, can come together to really help organisations perform better and help people to perform better. So it kind of gives it talks about employee benefits as being where the kind of well-being focus came from. So that was the social welfare tradition of some of the industrialists, like Heinz and people like that. So they genuinely wanted to look after their employees, their kind of health, and that sort of manifests itself today in employee assistance programs and sort of kind of health plans. And then there's L&D that grew out of the kind of industrialization of work and the fact that factories needed to up production and basically bring lots of new workers in and get them up to speed so that they could produce more. So there was this kind of mass training movement, and then that led into the scientific management kind of strand of thinking that really influenced training and classroom-based training. So it kind of starts by talking about all of that and some of the inherent problems. Like at the same time as scientific management, we have people like Ebbinghaus saying, well, you just forget everything if you're just taught in a classroom. You forget everything within, very soon after leaving the classroom. So there are some inherent problems there. But the thrust of this piece is the need to think about how employees can thrive. And they talk about employee thriving. And basically, it argues that we need to rethink how employee benefits and learning and development work together in order to support people so they feel good, so they can perform better. And that, interestingly, is not what's happened in organisations. The history is not that they work together. And I think when you step back and think about that, I think, God, that's absolutely crazy that it hasn't developed like that, but it hasn't. So HR teams have these different silos which really need to be working together.
Yes, and it argues very strongly to look at all of these things holistically rather than in a fragmented way. They pick up this acronym called PRISM, and PRISM is prospection, imagining possible futures, and that's really important. If you can't see any way out of the position you're in or any alternative to the world that you inhabit, then it's very hard to change and to do anything to make the world better. So prospection, resilience and cognitive ability, which is the heart of it, really, resilience, ability to not only see alternative worlds, but make those happen. The value of creativity and innovation, rapid rapport to build social support. So building this network of support across the organization, not leaving people all on their own to drown in a sea of conflict and challenge and all the other things that are going on at the moment. And then finally, meaning and mattering, the motivation that propels us forward, because we've got a clear understanding of why we're here, what we're supposed to be doing, what is important, and that motivates us to create a world where more things mean more and more things matter. So I think it's a really serious, interesting journal article, basically, Martin, and we don't look at many of those, but perhaps we should. So we'll put a link up. It's not very long. It's not something that's going to take you hours to wade through, but it is very well argued. It's reinforced very strongly by access to other research, and it's got two kind of giants, really, of the well-being and performance world coming together to write this. Any final thoughts, Martin?
Yeah, I thought, the authors highlight the structural problems that stop HR being able to kind of focus on well-being in a more holistic way. And then they propose at the end, which I think is quite interesting, what they call an employee thriving team. Now, I don't know about the name, but the idea that there is a team that's responsible for the physical, emotional health, personal growth and professional growth of an employee, I think that concept is really interesting. And I wonder if we're going to gain traction around that in the coming years, because who would argue against that actually you need that mix of physical and mental health and well-being in order to do your job, to perform better, to develop your career and develop your role in an organisation. And I think investors and leadership teams will become increasingly interested in that, because I think that's, it'll be interesting. Will that lead to longer term benefits for the organisation? Yes. I mean, the final point I would say is that the authors do say that actually this is not about short term efficiencies. This is about longer term health and well-being of employees to deliver better results over time. So it's not, you're in for the long haul if you take this approach. I think it's an interesting approach, well worth reading.
I agree. And also that if organisations are going to be there for the long haul, staff have to be available and performing. And under the current model, people perform optimally really well and then just burn out. And that is not what we require in the current climate. So thank you for drawing our attention to this, Martin. As I say, the crawl is there. Download this and read it. I think you'll find it absolutely fascinating. Martin, thank you very much for drawing our attention.
Thanks, Nigel.
Well, yet another show put to bed. Well done, Kate. Thank you very much for all your help. Good programme this month, I thought. I really liked talking to James Sharrod. Bright Horizons is such an interesting company. They run 1,000 nursery schools all over the world. And the focus is on creating a great learning environment for kids and a great learning environment for staff as well, because they think the two things come together. If you don't give staff lifelong learning opportunities, you can't transmit that enthusiasm and that quality to the children. And it also creates a massively stable organization. So in a very difficult environment where it's hard to retain staff, where there's whole sorts of issues around payment and career, they've apparently seem to have cracked it. So that James has been at Bright Horizons since university. So he's been there 15 years.
and he's gone from being a helper in a nursery school to one of the senior managers. He's in charge of all the partnership and pathway programs, so that every member of staff in the whole company gets a learning pathway. And they start their leadership program whenever anyone wants to start it. So if you've been in the company a year, you can go on a leadership track if you want to. You don't have to. And that can take you right through to senior manager. So they've got lots of good things going for them. And they've created this very stable, kind of funky organization as a result. So I really enjoyed that. And I also enjoyed the MIT report, because what they're basically saying is the way HR sees itself is way too narrow. And the very least it should do is incorporate comp and ben, so that they've got a holistic picture of what motivates and drives individuals in the organization forward. And they're recommending a much more coaching kind of culture, so that HR is there to help, not there to punish or fire, which is what a lot of people think HR is. That's their purpose in life.
Well, I had a conversation just in the last couple of weeks, and we were talking about how L&D can't necessarily solve for skills all by itself. Talent management, talent acquisition are obvious partners under the HR umbrella. But actually, when you start to think about rewards and comps and bends and skills, there's some really interesting links there. So I think we come back to that piece of no man is an island. And I think if HR are being given employee experience as a problem to solve, back to your point about Bright Horizons as well, because they've actually really thought through the employee experience there. That's not just an L&D thing that they're solving there. That's not just an L&D challenge that they're solving. They've thought through the whole employee experience. They've thought through retention, benefits, rewards, all of those things linked back to learning. That holistic view is definitely the utopia that I think HR should.
100%. And they don't have a head of L&D. They have a head of people, and then underneath that there are the various elements that build up together to be head of people. And it's the way forward, and it builds success. So, Kate, what's on? Are there any shows on coming up?
Well, obviously we're in the summer season, so people can put their feet up for the next few weeks. But we're kicking off in September with our friends at the LPI. Have got Learning Live on the 13th and 14th of September in London. Then we're straight across to Birmingham, sunny Birmingham, for the World of Learning on the 10th and 11th. Then my good friends at Unleash have got Unleash World happening in Paris on the 17th and 18th of October as well, just before half term. And just before that, actually, is the COPD have got their People Analytics event, which I'm really interested in, on the 11th and 12th of October too. So plenty to keep people going. So rest up now and get yourself ready for the autumn.
Absolutely right, Kate. And we'll be back. We'll be back in August, a little bit earlier, 24th of August this month. So 24th of August, we'll see you there. Thanks very much, Kate. Look forward to talking to you then.
See you soon.